For player profiles, in-depth features, and exclusive interviews, visit sfhandbook.com to learn more about the best young football players in the world. Hello and welcome back to the Scouted Football podcast. I'm Joe Donoghue and as always we're going to be discussing a particular topic in the world of under-23 football today. We've discussed the Austrian Bundesliga on this podcast quite a lot recently, including an episode at the beginning of the 2021-22 season, largely because FC Red Bull Salzburg are an interesting case study to follow when it comes to youth football, and they've had an excellent start to the campaign. But I think it's only fair that we discuss their neighbours, Switzerland, who at the moment are at the very least doing a little bit better on the international scene than their Alpine counterparts. I'm delighted to say that today we have Oliver Zesiger, one of the lead football manager researchers for Switzerland, as well as being a professional football scout, to talk us through some of the teams and players in the Swiss Super League. Names you might end up becoming more mainstream in the coming seasons. Oliver, welcome to the Scouted Pod. How are things in Switzerland at the moment?
Hello, Joe. Thanks for having me, first off. Things are all right. There are a lot of ongoings right now behind the scenes because, away fans were banned for the final two match days. And to prevent COVID restrictions hitting football again. Interesting times to be an observer of Swiss football.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think from my vantage point in the UK, it's been interesting to see the different stances that the other European governments and European countries, leagues and associations have taken with obviously the ongoing global situation. But just talk us through a little bit more about your role with Football Manager, because I'm sure that's a game which, if not the vast majority of people who listen to this podcast will have played, then I think a fair portion will have played Football Manager before. Some may have even started a save in Switzerland with one of the teams we're going to discuss. But what is sort of the role that you do with the researching side of things?
Yeah, I think some of your listeners might have heard about Football Manager. I am with FM with Sports Interactive for 12 years now, going into my 13th year. I am a co-head researcher. I'm responsible for a team of assistant researchers who take care of a club or a league. And I'm responsible for basically every playable club, which means the top division and the second division, including under 21s and under 18s. And I do have a team, as I said, of dedicated assistant researchers. But in the end, I have a final say on things like current ability, potential ability, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's really exciting because, I mean, from somebody who has played Football Manager for probably longer than 13 years, it's so curious to think about the processes that go into it and why the decisions are made on certain players. In your time that you've been working with Sports Interactive, who are some of your favorite players to have come through those top two leagues in Switzerland?
Yeah, when I started out, a certain Mr. Xherdan Shaqiri also started out at Basel. He was around the age of 17, 18, I believe, back in 2009. And he was basically my first wonder kid I was happy to create. Then Granit, Xhaka, of course. Brelembolo, a personal favorite of mine, not only because of his playing style, because of his character and his personality as well. And yeah, there were many good players. I'm also happy to say I heavily underrated Mohamed Salah when he was in Switzerland. And many good players went through my fingers. I think I'm lucky to say I've got more than 50% right, and some were over, some were underrated, but happens to the best of them.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much par for the course, really. I mean, it's always very difficult, especially from our perspective, trying to predict how a player's career will go. There are lots of extenuating factors and circumstances that go into that. But yeah, I think in general, the Swiss Super League, it kind of flies under the radar a little bit, especially across here in the UK, and compared to the Austrian Bundesliga. because Swiss teams haven't had sort of the same impact as a Red Bull Salzburg, as I mentioned earlier, over the past few seasons, with them doing quite well in the Champions League. But I think it's important not to forget, for a lot of us, that Mohamed Salah obviously was at Basel, and Xherdan, Shaqiri, Granit, Xhaka, Bril Mbolo, these players that are pretty synonymous with European football, and not just the second division or the first division, but the top teams in those top leagues. So yeah, I think it's about time, certainly on this podcast, that we paid a bit of attention to the Swiss Super League. But what is sort of the format of the league in Switzerland? The top flight.
Yeah, it's a 10 team league, and the funny thing is, if Switzerland is in the top 15 in the UEFA coefficient, then half the league plays in Europe, and one team goes straight down to the Challenge League, which is the second division, and one team plays a relegation playoff. So three teams are basically not in Europe and not in the relegation zone. It's a problem at Team League because teams don't have qualification security. It means they can't plan the next season unless they're mathematically safe. And this is a big problem. With a larger league, you would have a secure midfield where you could plan ahead, where you're safe, you're not going down, you're not in trouble, or you may not play in Europe. As well. This 10 team format has been ongoing since 2003, 2004, I believe. And people are now starting to talk again about a format change, about a bigger league, about a secure midfield, and about more security in planning for clubs.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's not something I'd considered, to be honest, about teams and leagues which were only 10 teams. It's obviously that there'll be lots of implications and permutations for teams if they do qualify for Europe. With in terms of the budgets for next season and whatnot, and especially for those who are relegated. So yeah, I suppose that's quite an important point. This season we've got FC Zurich, who are currently top of the table with 34 points from 16 games, trailing them ever so slightly FC Basel, Lugano, Young Boys, Grasshoppers, Servette, Sion, St. Gallen, and then you got Lausanne in the relegation playoff places at the moment, and Lucerne in the bottom spot. I mean, in terms of the teams that you're most familiar with, Oliver, who would you say is the team that you've got the best handle on?
I would say certainly Basel, because I am a fan since 1994, and Young Boys because they're close to where I live. But I have a pretty good handle on every team. Luckily, for Football Manager, I've dedicated assistants who work on a team who are fans of those teams. So I don't have to have a good handle on every team. But I still research Basel and Young Boys and several other teams, and I think that Basel's probably the one I know best.
Good stuff. I suppose that takes us in nicely then to discussing FC Basel, because this season in particular, they've got quite a few interesting players from a scouted football perspective. Artur Cabral, who is 23, so he's at the upper bound of players that we cover at Scouted, but he's doing spectacularly this season, isn't he? I mean, his scoring record since arriving in Europe, I think from Palmeiras in Brazil, has been just phenomenal. I think it's something like 14 goals maybe in the Super League, and then a ridiculous amount in, I think it might be 12 in 9 European fixtures this season for Basel. So he's he knows how to find the back of the net. It's interesting because Arthur has kind of come onto my radar a little bit recently, because he's been linked with a handful of English clubs. He's been linked with a handful of clubs in the top 5 European leagues. I mean, first of all, what's he like as a player? But also, do you think that the Swiss Super League can be a really good platform for these types of players?
Sure, yeah. The Swiss Super League is a stepping stone league, and at that, it is almost at an elite level of progressing players, buying cheap and selling on. As the landscape in football has changed in the last 10 years, the likes of Salah and other players of that level would not come to Switzerland nowadays. They would go to a bigger league. But in terms of progressing players, the Swiss league is excellent at that. Cabral himself, I mean, he's decently tall and he's strong, and he's almost like a target man in that he plays with his back to the goal when the team is in attack, and then moves into a channel right in front of goal. He's also able to shoot from a distance, so his technical ability is quite good. The only thing that worries me a bit, if we're talking about interest from the Premier League in Artur Cabral, is that he doesn't work as efficiently against the ball. He often sees a bit off, a bit. I wouldn't say lazy, but just a step behind the ball, and that's in if you're playing organized pressing, this could kill your press, and that's my main worry about him. But his goal scoring record is spectacular. He scored in all competitions this season 25 goals in 27 games, assisted on 8 more. Was called up to the Brazilian national team, although didn't play. But the last time a Swiss player was called up to the Brazilian national team was in 1998. So
Wow.
it's quite miraculous that Artur Cabral managed to get called up, and I clearly understand why someone like Artur Cabral is highly sought after in the market, because player who scores goals and is a safe penalty taker is always a player that will be in high demand in football.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with that goals record alone, that's going to be, that's going to be funneling a lot of interest from sporting directors all across Europe to go and have a look at him. It's that's no fluke. That's not chance or coincidence that he's finding the net that regularly for Basel. And it's not just this season either. He scored 18 goals, I think, in the league last year. I mean, he looks on course to surpass that in the next few weeks at this rate. But yeah, he's somebody who I think at 23, he'll certainly be playing in sort of with no disrespect to the Swiss league, as you said, it's a stepping stone at the moment, but he'll be playing in a league which typically has more prestigious clubs and wealthier clubs. I think it's important to say in the near future. It's interesting that you mentioned about his work rate off the ball. I think we do tend to see that with a certain type of striker. I mean, Diego Costa was particularly like that, wasn't he? When he was playing in Europe, he knew where to find the back of the net, but he knew where to find spaces in the final third and how to be really aggressive with defenders. But his pressing was not what he was famed for. In terms of the other players at Basel this season, there are a few on loan, and that's what I kind of want to discuss next, because I think when you talk about loan players, a lot of the time you question their commitment, you question whether they're fully bought into the long-term objectives of a club, because they know they're only going to be there for 6 months to a year. But there are two very young players I think they're both still teenagers in the first team at the moment, in Joelson Fernandes, who signed on loan from Sporting in Portugal, and Sebastiano Esposito, who signed on loan from Inter in Italy, of course. And there was also, you might have to correct me on the pronunciation here, Darian Males on a 2-year loan from Inter as well. And that got me thinking, is there sort of a relationship between Basel and other clubs in Europe where they can take young players on loan and develop them in a top flight league and potentially European football?
Yeah, there is. Although it's a very recent relationship with those big clubs. They also signed a right back from Real Madrid. It's because the ownership has changed in Basel. David Degen, former Basel player, and twin brother of Philip Degen, a former Liverpool player. Um, David Degen is now the new owner, and he has changed the system of how the club works. They want to work with big clubs with loaning out by loaning out players, talented youngsters. By the way, they have a buy option on every single one of those players, so that's not just a loan for a loan's sake. If they wanted, they could buy those players. But yeah, that's the new system in Basel. If you look at the squad, around 5 or 6 top talents are loaned. Some were signed permanently. But that's pretty much how the club will work moving forwards, by loaning well trained, well formed, well educated players from bigger clubs, make them better, either sign them with a buy option or give them back as better players after a year. It also is about growing the reputation as a premier formation club in Europe again, because Basel had that reputation once, lost it a little bit over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's now a goal of the current ownership to grow that reputation again.
Yeah, very interesting. I didn't know about the options to buy on those on those players, which I think I mean they should be, players who are going to develop immensely over the next few years. So if there have been some favourable fees that have been negotiated there, then that certainly stands the club in good stead. I know that sometimes the options to buy can be I don't know, suffocating a little bit because sorry, obligations to buy can be suffocating a little bit. But if the options are there, then I suppose the ball is very much in Basel's court. How have Joelson and Esposito got on so far in the league?
Yeah, Scholson has had a tricky start. He's very raw, as you can see when you watch him for 5 or more minutes.
Yeah.
He got 10 minutes at the end of last week's game against Lausanne. Lost the ball. Didn't have a good stint to begin with. Lost the ball, then made a wrong decision and went to go into a tackle, and then gave away a penalty, all within one sequence. And it was harsh because he was crying afterwards. I felt really sorry for him, but he's 18 and he will improve. But he's raw and he needs to train to be or just get minutes at the end of games where the game is already decided, to be able to improve. They also loaned him for 2 years, so no worries. There is enough time for
Hmm.
him to improve, and he will get that time, I'm sure. Esposito is a different story. He came in, was a starter from begin with, scored some great goals. One with the outside of the boot into the far corner, a direct free kick against the Young Boys in the top of the league game, and he's excellent. He's technically so good. He plays behind Artur Cabral, almost in a 9.5 or a 10 role. He roams from side to side to give support to the wing players, and he still manages to be in position for a good finish. Unfortunately, his progression was hampered by injuries a bit, but he's on his way back, and I'm really happy to see him again because he's really good to watch when he's in form, and he's a highlight of the Swiss Super League.
Yeah, the first time I watched Esposito was in Serie A when I think he took a penalty for Inter. It was probably it was almost definitely at the end of one of the games which Inter had already tied up and they'd already won. But it kind of struck me that this 18-year-old or 17-year-old as he was at the time was stepping up in front of the San Siro to take a penalty. I thought, this kid's got a little bit something about him. So it's encouraging to see that obviously injuries aside, he's doing well in Switzerland at the moment. In terms of, I mean, we've been discussing loans, we've been discussing incoming loans, but there's been one outgoing loan from Basel this season, which caught my eye in the data, and that was Mamadou Kalisen, who is on loan at Grasshoppers from Basel. And he's averaging zero point 0.9 non-penalty goals and assists per 90 in the league. And for a team which is around mid-table, he's pretty much up there with the best 5 or 6 or 7 players in terms of the numbers across the league. So that was, I mean, he was somebody who stood out. I've only been able to watch sort of a few little clips of him, but I wanted to sort of to ask your opinion on Mamadou Kalisen.
Yeah, Mamadou Kalisen has quite a journey behind him. He arrived as one of those Juventus Turin deals where they swapped players, and he didn't get a work permit at the beginning here in Switzerland, and he was moved to Cyprus to play there for a season, so he would get his work permit. Came back and played for the under 21s in Basel. And I watched him from time to time with the under 21s, and I didn't really like him. The thing is, he was playing as a winger, and while he's quick, he's not really a dribbler. He's not really the one who wins one-on-one duels, except with speed. So Grasshoppers play in a system quite like Gasparini's 3-5-2 in Atalanta. And he's one of the two strikers which fits him much better. And he's been a revelation for Grasshoppers since he's arrived here. He scored this weekend. You're in zero point 0.9 and non penalty goals and assists per 90 are a bit outdated because he scored a hat trick this weekend. So I'm sure those numbers have risen.
Yeah, they must have done. Yeah, I'm just looking
Yeah, yeah,
now. Hat trick against St. Gallen.
yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
What a great timing.
Yeah, and the second goal was a bicycle kick.
Oh,
So
perfect.
he's in fine form, and that's quite an understatement. Now, Grasshoppers have loaned him, and they have a buy option as well. So I would assume that at the end of the season he will sign permanently with Grasshoppers. As I said, he's been a revelation. He's been very good. I was skeptical at the beginning. I was wrong, and this is another example of you can see some players just need the right role, the right coach who believes in them,
Mm.
and the right structure around them. And that's not only on the pitch but also off the pitch that people believe in the player. This is what's happening right now with Kalisen and Grasshoppers. I don't think he would play nearly as well for Basel as he does for Grasshoppers at the moment. So a very good transfer for all parties involved.
Yeah, definitely. And I tell you what, St. Gallen fans must absolutely hate him. I think that's 5 goals he scored against them this season.
Yeah,
So,
in 2 games.
yo, that's oh, you must be dreading the sight of him next time he lines up against them. But yeah, again, another interesting loanee. Um, with Grasshoppers, I kind of knew this, but I still don't know the ins and outs of it. But they have a sort of a partnership with Wolves in the Premier League, don't they? What's sort of the relationship there? How does that work?
Yes, so Wolves are clearly doing or helping them out with scouting is one part. I mean, Wolves have an established scouting system, scouting structure, and the Grasshoppers are surely able to rely on Wolves to help them out with scouting. They also help them out with loan players. Leonardo Campana, for
Mm,
example, Bendegush Bolla, is another player who arrived on loan. Last season was Conor Ronan and several other players who arrived from Wolves. And I think the goal is that some players return to Wolves as better players. Some players will stay at Grasshoppers permanently, and then maybe will be sold to a bigger league when they or if they improve. That's a common structure in Switzerland nowadays because Lausanne has a similar structure with Nice in France, where Nice does the scouting and loan players to Lausanne to improve, which was what happened last year with Lucas Dacunia, for example.
mm.
And Lugano now was recently bought by the owner of Chicago Fire, and they are a little bit more eye to eye, Chicago Fire and Lugano. But it's a similar structure as well, where they can move players around if someone doesn't really get on with the football in America. He can come to Europe and still make a name for himself. So that's a recent trend in Swiss football that teams are part or are within the structure of a bigger team.
Yeah, I think we've seen that in places like Belgium as well, haven't we? With clubs like I mean I know that Brighton and Hove Albion's owner Tony Bloom owns Union Saint Gilloise. Maybe I've
Yeah.
pronounced that incorrectly, but they're currently top of the Belgian Pro League. The last time I checked, anyway. Hopefully, I'm not out of date again like I was with Cali Sen. But yeah, they've been doing really well this season, and I think it's quite a novel concept where as you say, if the football or the style of play or the management isn't really working for a player over in one part of the world, then if the ownership group does have a connection in Switzerland, for example, or a Belgium or somewhere else, then it makes it a lot easier to sort of move that player where you can still use them as an asset within the same ownership umbrella. And it's something which I think English clubs are certainly going to explore a little bit more because of the work permit regulations Brighton are doing that at the moment. I think where they loaned out Moises Caicedo to Belgium to Beerschot to effectively get him some minutes, but also to help with that work permit system. So yeah, it's quite an interesting system. We've spoken quite a bit about FC Basel there to begin with, but they're not top of the league, are they? It's FC Zurich at the moment. And there's one player in particular which probably comes as no surprise to you, that is my favourite from FC Zurich, and the reason that I was not up to date with Kalisen is because I've just been watching Becir Omeragic play for Zurich as the right-sided centre half that he is. I really, really like him. I really like his style, playing at the back. He's approaching 75 games for Zurich, which I think is fantastic for a player who's still 19 years old. And yeah, he's doing really well on that right hand side of Andre Breitenreiter's back three. I mean, you clearly know a lot more about him than I do, so I'll delegate to you on this. But what's your opinion of Omeragic?
Yeah, he's been touted as a potential star for the future for a very long time, and
Mm.
he's now beginning to live up to that tag. He's already an international. He's played for Switzerland a few minutes. I think he's played a whole game against Spain and did reasonably well. And he was 18 at the time. And Bechir is someone I like watching, as you do, because he's able to carry the ball into midfield, and he's doing it with a certain elegance. Now he has some issues. He's not the fastest. He's physically he could still develop a bit more strength maybe. But in general, he's a very good defender. He's usually reliable, at least this season. Sometimes he has some concentration lapses, but the best of them have them. So yeah, Becci is a really good player and also a strong passer. So if you're looking for someone who's defensively reliable and can play the first ball or carry the ball into the midfield, he's very good. But there are others at Zurich, and Zurich was bad last season. Zurich was really bad. But this season, with the new coach, with Andre Breitenreiter, as you mentioned, they're suddenly really good. They're fun to watch. They work hard on the pitch and they get results. I don't think they will win the title, but they will come very close if they continue like this. Two other mentions from the young guys, the young squad at Zurich, is the left back Adrian Guerrero.
Mm.
He was formed by Barcelona. He was formed by Valencia, and he's at 3 goals and 6 assists in 15 games. Only 23 years of age. Someone who will probably make the step abroad. And the other one is Wilfried Gnonto. He's been at Zurich for. He's one of those who came from Inter as well. It was surprised that he chose Zurich over Inter, and he's been at Zurich since 2020, and he's only 18 years of age, and he's the captain of the Italian under-19s national team. So another really, really good player that you need to keep watching because this guy could develop into a really good player in a top 5 league.
Yeah, with Gnonto, he's got a good record at youth international level with Italy, doesn't he? But it's he's been coming off the bench more often than not for Zurich. But as you say, at 18 years old, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You were talking about Joelson at Basel earlier, how he needs to come on in games and just get that familiarity with when the game's already wrapped up. And that's what Gnonto's doing at the moment, as far as I can see. But yeah, I mean, it's Zurich. I think I agree with you that perhaps they might not have the stamina to go all the way and win the title. But to have gone from, was it 7th or 8th last season that they finished? So in a 10-team league, they were very much in the bottom half. To go on to be sort of challenging this year definitely shows that there's been progress under Breitenreiter, and obviously is helped by the fact that you've got these players like Omeragic and Gnonto and Guerrero who are doing well and playing regularly, playing regular football in a team that are challenging at the right end of the table. Elsewhere in the league, I think I was going to get to young boys towards the end, but we should also mention, young boys are unbeaten against Manchester United in the Champions League this season. I can't believe it's taken me half an hour to get to that point. Obviously, one win, one draw. Last night, a fantastic strike from Fabian Rieder, who is 19 years old, at Old Trafford. I mean, yeah, first of all, Fabian Rieder, but young boys in general. What have they been like this season?
Young boys have dominated Swiss football in the past 3 or 4 seasons, and they've not this season because their coach Gerardo went to Leverkusen, and David Wagner came in. It's always difficult for a new coach to come into a league that he's or into a country where he's never been before, and with a team that has been maybe a bit fatigued from all the title winning, and so they are not great. I believe at this current moment they won only 2 of the last 9 or 10 games, so not great. They also have a lot of injured players. Christian Fasnacht, an international, is injured. Jean-Pierre Samé, who broke the goal scoring record last season or the season before, is injured. And several other players were or are still injured. That's certainly a problem for them. But they just kicked out of the Champions League, which means they don't have cup football, they don't have international football. They only have league football to concentrate on in the second round or the second half of the season. So I would expect them to catch up with the top of the table and probably going to win the title again.
Also, you think that the young boys will, without the distraction, that they'll probably still do better than Basel and Zurich, who are a fair few points ahead of them already.
Yeah, I believe so. Because if I look at last season, they dominated the league. They won with
Yeah.
20 plus points, and they didn't change that much in the team. Obviously, the coach changed, but it didn't change that much. So they should be capable of winning the title again, or playing winning in streaks again, and finish top.
All right, okay, fair enough. I'll hold you to that at the end of the season, Oliver, because
We'll,
at the
we'll see.
from a very rookie perspective on Swiss football, it would look as though it's a 2-horse race, but no, that's where the expertise comes in, I suppose, doesn't it? Elsewhere in the league, you've got other teams like Servette, and the reason that I don't know, do I have a soft spot for them? A tiny one, because that's where Kevin and Babu signed for Newcastle from. And for ever since that happened, I've always been enamored by Kevin and Babu. Even though last night for Wolfsburg he was to blame for 2 of the goals that they conceded. It's fair to say, but yes, Servette, they've been doing all right this season as well. They did well last season, obviously finishing third and qualifying for European football. But there's one player in particular who is, of particular interest to me from sort of a scouted football perspective. And again, I've said this 2 or 3 times already on the podcast, but I'm going to completely annihilate his name in such a terrible way. But Castro Imeri, which Oliver, please correct me on when you speak about him. He's
Castriot, yeah.
Castriot.
Castriot, yes.
Oh, so I was overcomplicating it. It's just Castriot Imeri. He's born in 2000. He's another Swiss international, just like Bechir Omeragic. But he's another who's, unlike Omeragic, who's a defender. Imeri at Servette this season is playing regularly and scoring lots of goals from midfield. He's somebody who, when you're posting those numbers, I think it's 8 that he's got this season, which puts him joint third in the Swiss Super League as things stand. There's something which is happening there, isn't there?
Yes, and I can probably explain what happened. He was called up to the national team in early November, and since then he's kicked on. And I think he scored in 4 games straight. I can verify this, but he's had a boost of confidence by being called up. He's already enjoyed a good season, otherwise he wouldn't have been called up to the national team. But no, sorry, he scored 6 in the last 5 games.
Oof, not a bad record.
Yeah, not a bad record at all. And for a midfielder especially.
Exactly.
He's kicked on. And that's another example of where you can see how important confidence is for a player, because he was starting to play regularly, but he was in no means a starter for Servette over the past few seasons. But now it's unthinkable that he even starts a game from the bench or gets subbed out at the end of a game for other reasons than tactical. No, he's excellent. He has a very strong right foot. Don't let him shoot from within 25 yards, and don't let him take free kicks near the goal, and don't let him play through balls. He's not a number 10. I think he has some similarities to Insigne. Cuts inside and is able to shoot from distance. But overall, he's just a very good player, and everybody knew he was a very good player. He just didn't get chances to prove himself over a stretch of games for Servette. He's now one of their leading players with Mika Stefanovic. Both are very good, and both are carrying the team at the moment. And I would assume he's one of the main candidates to land in a top five league at the end of the season. My best guess is Liga, because of the language, also because of the connection of Servette with France. I think it would make a lot of sense for him to move on at the end of the season because he's now proving that he's ready.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there, based on purely his statistics alone. And just having a look up, he's played from Switzerland under-16s, every age group up to the 21s, and then in November, as you said, made his senior debut for the Swiss national team, which it must be said, obviously qualified for the World Cup in Qatar automatically next summer. I almost said next winter, in 2022. So hopefully there might be an outside chance that if he does get a move or if he does continue, the second half of the season in the same form that he's performed in the first half, that we might see him over in Qatar with the Swiss team, because we saw over the Euros it was Ruben Vargas, a few of the younger players that were doing well, that were called up to that Swiss squad. But yeah, hopefully that we'll see a little bit more of him. And also, just a little finer point for any keen scouted football listeners. He not the same year, I must stress, but he does have the same birthday as me as well. So there's another soft spot for me to have for Servette, alongside the Mbabu link. But
See, your new favorite player sorted.
exactly, just like that. I'm going to watch Servette every week now. Literally, just going to hop onto Y Scout and just catch all their games. But yeah, also born in Geneva, and a lovely city, which I've been to once, but not for anywhere near long enough. But yeah, that fantastic Castriot Imeri, who's been playing very well, obviously a Swiss international. I've got listed down here an honourable mention section just to finish things off, because I don't. These were the players that we've discussed so far were the ones which you couldn't avoid discussing when you're talking about young players in Switzerland, because they are so good. But are there any that you think are perhaps flying even further under the radar from your perspective?
Yeah, someone who's been flying under the radar now, this season especially, is Leonidas Stergiou from St. Gallen. He's a modern defender, very quick, very good at anticipating attacks. He plays in a high up the pitch pressing system, which is playing to his strengths as a central defender. He, as I said, quick and with a good first ball as well. But he has had trouble with injuries this season and with a struggling team. So we'll see. He's only, I think he's 19 as well, so he's still very young, and people probably move on at the end of the season. But he has to choose the right club with the right system, because I believe that the high pressing system is the right one for him.
Oh, very interesting. Would you see potentially in future? By the way, Leonidas Sturgiou, what a name that is!
Yes, yes, exactly.
Fantastic.
I think he has a Greek mother or a Greek father, but the name Leonidas alone is superb.
Oh, absolutely brilliant! Yeah. I mean, could we see potentially in future him and Omeragic lining up alongside each other at centre back for the Swiss national team?
Yeah, that's a very good possibility. I think that for now, Amarakic is the safer bet of the
Mm.
two, but I think both will get their chances. I mean, Stergiou at the age of 19 is playing for the under 21s
Hmm.
national team, so I think the chances are very good that if he hits his next transfer, that Stergiou will be called up to the Swiss national team, especially since Murat Yakin, our new national coach, likes to call up one or two very young players to give them uh, to show them that they're being watched and they're being appreciated, and there is an open door for them if they perform consistently, which is something I really like. And I'm sure Stergiou, as I said, if he hits his next transfer, will be on the list, on the short list for national players. There are other players aside from Stergiou that I really like that people should have an eye on. And even though they're at the bottom of the league right now, it's Philippe Ugrinic from FC Luzern, a central midfielder, age 22. Spent some time in the Netherlands. He is a beast, a physical. He is a physical beast. He's a box-to-box player, although better in attack than in defense.
Uh-huh.
Um, but for someone who plays for a team that is bottom of the table, he's 15 games, 4 goals, 3 assists from central midfield, and he's capable of bossing the midfield with the right people around him. And as I said, he's strong. He's technically good. He has a very good shot. Although problem is he knows that he has a good shot and he uses it a lot, and which means
I
his
see.
XG numbers are not very good.
I see. So a little bit of the confidence there, that he thinks
Yes,
he can score all these long range Hollywood goals. Yeah, I mean,
yes, exactly.
to be honest, it sounds like he's doing it all by himself. I've never watched him, but yeah, Filip Ugrinic playing for Luzern.
Yes.
That's a name which I'm gonna scribble down diligently now.
Yeah, go and watch him. Just watch his physique. I mean, there was once a rumor, and I think it to be true, that he did train wrong and he did train too much on his physique, and then he went to Holland and did train differently, lost some of his muscles, and now looks like more like a footballer than a bodybuilder. But I think he's tailor made for a league, for a physical league. I could see him playing the Premier League, although not upper tier. But he's one to watch, because I like this. I like this guy. Just he's cheeky a bit, and he's gutsy, and I like the player a lot. Also, keep an eye on Lausanne. They have a very young squad. If you go through their squad, their players 20, 18, 19, 19. They have Archie Brown, signed from Derby County,
All
a
right.
young 19 years old Englishman. And they have Trey Coyle from Arsenal Reserves, signed this year, and another one talented young player. And they also have some talented Ivorians like Brahima Ouattara, Jean Nguesson, and others, and 2 or 3 good young Swiss midfielders in, let's say, Gabriel Barres, for example, or also defenders Karim So, Ane Lucic. They are very young, currently second to last because probably of the age, and a group needs some time to gel until they can really go. And I think as soon as they're ready, they will be fine. And they have so much talent in their squad that they could actually, if the club lets those talents develop over another season, that they could play a role in, let's say, spots 3 to 5 for next season.
Very, very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Oliver, for those names, because I have been scribbling them down as you've been rattling them off, because I think it is true that the Swiss Super League can become one of those leagues which is producing your Xherdan Shaqiri's, Granit Xhaka's, and Mohamed Salah's in future again, and obviously the clubs that we've discussed, your Zurichs and your Servettes and FC Basel in particular, they'll play a major role in it. And I think for anybody who has the same sort of interest in young players in football and who's listening to this podcast, I think I really would like to extend my thanks to say that it's been great, first of all, to speak to someone behind the scenes with Sports Interactive, and who decides certain elements of the Football Manager saves that we all enjoy so much, but as well for your expertise on the Swiss Super League.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love talking about it. I'm passionate about football, first of all, but I'm also very passionate about Swiss football and everything that comes with it, the good and the bad. I love it. It's just it's my home country, but also it's the league that I follow for over 25 years. So I'm happy to talk about it all the time.
Brilliant stuff. And where can people find you on Twitter, online? Where can they find your work and examples of that?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at AULIT_Z or Oliver Zesiger. If you look for me, I tweet sometimes about Swiss football. My job is to watch games, so I'm often at the weekends when the games are taking place. I'm often at the stadium, so a bit less tweeting at the weekends during games. But I'm always happy to chat football manager. So hit me up on DMs or give me a tweet or talk about whatever is on your mind when it comes to Swiss football.
Perfect. And for anybody who wants to follow Oliver, then we'll be putting his @ into the description of this episode as well. But yeah, that just about wraps things up for this week's episode. Thank you again to Oliver, and thank you again to all of you who are listening to this week's episode. We'll be back in the meantime with more episodes just like this, more features and more storylines from the world of under-23 football. I've been Joe Donahue. Thank you very much for listening. This has been the Scouted Football Podcast. Bye for now. For player profiles, in-depth features, and exclusive interviews, visit sfhandbook.com to learn more about the best young football players in the world.